Thank you so much for joining us for our series of virtual in-conversation events. We are incredibly grateful to all of the creatives and artists who shared their time, their wisdom, and their experience with us. It's easy to ask in the face of a global pandemic, why do the arts matter? But the truth is that theatre is as old as civilization itself. It's a place where we learn, we explore, and we share our common humanity. It's a pressure valve for society, a safe space in which to explore dangerous ideas. And above all, it's entertaining. At Dark Unicorn Productions, we rely very heavily on the support of our wonderful patrons to continue our work. You can join them and become a patron of the arts yourself by joining our scheme, which starts at just £50 per year to become a rainbow unicorn. Be part of the Dark Unicorn family. Be part of the recovery and the future of theatre. Don't let the lights go out. Become a patron today. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to Dark Unicorn in Conversation. My guest today is the actor Elliot Chapman, who came to the industry a fraction later than many, after a series of other roles in the worlds of journalism and education, prior to his training at Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, graduating in 2012, alongside figures such as Faye Marseille, who went on to star in The White Queen, Pride, and Game of Thrones. Today, perhaps best known for audio roles as a book narrator and full-cast audio drama actor for Audible.com, his first major leap into the audio market was as the actor cast to replace the late Michael Craze in Big Finish Productions' Doctor Who strand, where he took on the role of Cockney sailor Ben Jackson, alongside original cast members Annika Wills as Polly and Fraser Hines not only as Jamie, but also subbing in for the Second Doctor, in the absence of the late Patrick Troughton. Elliot took that and other general character roles across the strand for a number of years before finally departing last year, a departure he gives the inside track on as part of our conversation. Aside from his work as a disembodied voice, he has also been seen in a variety of theatrical roles, including a much-lauded Renfield in a site-specific production of Dracula in a deconsecrated chapel in his adopted home of Bristol, the #1 tour of the West End production of Yes, Prime Minister, and, as should be the right of every serious actor, 6 months in the West End in The Mousetrap. Elliot has been a dear friend since his drama school days, and we started off our recent chat by discussing the rather interesting label he appends to his career. Elliot, you probably have the most novel form of healthy attitude towards the turbulent career of a jobbing actor insofar as you regard yourself as retired, but occasionally coming out of retirement for a job. How is retirement for you, given that statistically you've got another 40 years or so of it?
Oh, bless you. Bless you, 40 years. I think it's probably, it's not an original statement to say it is such a precarious way to live your life. So I think probably all actors, to a greater or lesser degree, find ways to sort of shield themselves from the reality of it, unless they're immensely successful. And then I think they still have to shield themselves from the realities of it for different reasons. But I sort of thought, if I say I'm retired to myself, already my mind is in a different place. So then, if I decide that a job comes along and someone's mad enough to think that I'm right for it, and I decide to take it, it's like, oh, right, I'm coming out of retirement. Because that's the nice thing about retirement, you can always come out of it. So it's better than, for me, it's better than thinking of myself as an active actor. Because I think psychologically with that comes the, what's next? Should I be trying to make contact with this person? Should I be trying to do this? Do I email my agent? And I think you just end up on a constant cycle of probably pretty damaging, sort of self-inflicted turmoil, really. You don't need. So it's for me, I just found it a good way of going, okay, I'm retired, except when I'm not. It helped.
There's a tremendous amount of pressure put on actors, particularly in the start and the sort of the bunny slopes of their career, really, isn't there? I mean, it's especially if you get on the treadmill of a larger organisation or agency or whatever, that sort of ladder sensation that you're on.
Yeah, I mean, the metaphor or the image that probably comes to my mind is perhaps not so much the ladder, because I think the problem with being an actor, and I know it's not unique to our business, but there's no sense of that you can continually ascend, no matter, even if it is at a slow pace. You can come off the back of a job where maybe for a brief moment your profile has been somewhat inflated, and then you could be right back down to really trying to get the commercial for a very, very cheap brand of bleach or something. And so I like it.
Somebody has done the commercial for very
yeah. Oh, yeah. You went on to bigger and greater things, didn't you, for big multinationals? But I think the image that always springs into my mind is that you're in a car speeding down the M3 or something with a blindfold on, and someone else is driving. And that person might be an agent or a casting director, and then there's people in the back sort of shouting at them, but you can't understand what language they're speaking in. And I think this is probably where maybe if an actor breaks and they have a real success and it snowballs, I think perhaps they are able to remove the blindfold at least and maybe get one hand on the wheel. But I think for the majority of jobbing actors, it's just, you can hear the sounds of roaring traffic, and you can hear these voices in the back, and you can feel the sensation of swerving about, or being in a lay-by completely stock still, and that's about it. And it's sort of how you cope with that. And I guess linking back, for me, it was like the best way to cope with it is to sort of say, well, I'm not always active, and you're just a bit more reconciled to it, I guess. But yeah,
it's also a similar description really to a mystery tour in Northern Ireland in the 1970s. That with the arts, but shall we pause?
No, that was great. I just don't feel qualified to comment.
Were the arts part of your childhood?
In a strange sort of way. I mean, none of my family have been in the. I mean, my uncle was quite a talented painter, and he was accepted at an art school, but for various reasons didn't go. My mother's a very good amateur painter. There's been no one in the theatre or in the media, but I mean, it was a sort of very ordinary working class family setup. But my dad, I think, was considered quite an anomaly because working guy, but he always had a tremendous passion for Shakespeare. He read a lot of Shakespeare, and he never read me the plays, but I can remember from about the age of 7 through maybe 10 or 11, he could recite one of the plays as a piece of oral storytelling. He knew them so well that he would, they would become almost bedtime stories. So my first awareness of some of the plays was through his interpretation of them. So I think he probably had a little bit of an actor in him to do that. But beyond that, no. I think always an appreciation for the arts. I know my mother took me to the theatre at times when my father was working away. Books are a big thing. but that was really kind of it. I didn't know anyone in the theatre at all.
And at what point did live theatre hit your radar, and when did performing seem like a logical thing to you to do?
It was definitely being taken to the theatre. And I can still remember the very first thing I saw in a live, in an auditorium with an audience, and it wasn't a cinema screen. And it was, this is going to date me as well, but when I was a kid, there was a television program called Play Away, and there was Brian Cant was the rather wonderful actor who became synonymous with this somewhat later in his career. And that was the very first thing I saw live, which was a kind of sort of live version of Play Away. And I think the combination of an active audience, and you knew there was nothing separating you. You knew there was no screen. You knew there was nothing being projected. They were there. I think from a young age, that sort of crackle, that, oh, this is actually happening, sort of hit home. And then I think it just became the thing that happens with perhaps a lot of people, is we had the school play. And suddenly I was very fortunate to be cast in nice roles in school plays. And then the bug starts gnawing. Mm. I stopped it for quite some years, actually, because I did the school plays, and teachers and even some of my peers were complimentary enough to say, have you ever thought about this? Is it doing this, maybe professionally or something in the future, something, an ambition? And as a teenager, I absolutely put it to bed. And I thought, no, what a ridiculous way to live your life. What a minefield to try and pick your way through. There'll never be any security. I knew so much back then. And therefore, it took a while before, I think it's like anything, you try and push down anything in your life, and eventually it'll bubble back up and push out the cork. And that's kind of what happened. But I nearly successfully put it away. Yeah.
Mm. And you did go to drama school maybe a smidge later than others that you trained with. So, I mean, in that, how did you fill those years in between?
When I thought I'd put that idea of being an actor to bed, the only other thing I could vaguely get away with doing at school, I was a bit of a charlatan at school, really. I was just good enough to convince teachers I could do their subjects. But either it required a lot of hard work at home or utter flim-flam. And really the only thing that I had something of an ability to do was put words together on the page. So I thought about journalism. And I read English at university, and then after university, I joined a local newspaper. And then from there, I joined a local radio station working on news. And I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe I can tell stories this way rather than as an actor. What I found out eventually was, I think one of the vital skills of being a good journalist was missing. Although I think it was probably a good skill to be an actor, which was, I found out I was far too thin-skinned. I would take stories home. I could feel properly depressed. I'd even weep at times over certain stories. And I knew after a while that, I could either keep pushing and progressing through this. And there was talk about, getting together a portfolio or something, for bigger newspapers. And in the end, I thought, it's not working. I'm too thin-skinned. The paradox, of course, being an actor is you've got to be thin-skinned to really do it and thick-skinned to survive the industry. And that one's a very hard one to get through. So there was a limbo period where after journalism and before going to drama school, sort of trying to get those cogs and everything into position. I did some teaching. I worked for a bit with the family business when, it ran into trouble around the awful 2008, and it was sort of all hands to the, is it pumps or stumps? I can never remember. Pumps, yeah. I can fall into malapropisms sometimes. Well, my dad, he had worked, we were from just outside Plymouth, and he had worked in Devonport Dockyard for years. I mean, literally putting ships together and submarines. He was made redundant, and it really was, well, maybe I should just see if I can get my own thing together. Because actually, at that particular time, I think we were just around the 92 recession. Of course, work was very difficult, and he did. Unfortunately, he did rather well, and the business expanded all the way through the 90s and into the 2000s. So it was an engineering business, really. And then 2008, there were, just after Northern Rock and so on, there were early signs that maybe whatever was going to happen was going to hit manufacturing quite hard. And I just finished at a school and was sort of looking around for something. And my dad got in touch with me and said, I could actually use another person at the moment. He said, to look at the things that I can't look at. He said, because something's clearly on the horizon and we need to know whether it's a tsunami or, just a rather big wave that we might survive. And of course, as I went into it and did as much sort of projecting about the future as is possible with my little crystal ball and my Excel sheet, it became clear very, very quickly. I said, no, this is going to actually take out a lot of this sector. And it did. So I guess probably the only, in a way, really the only decent thing I've ever done in my life in a professional capacity was to be able to warn my dad that this terrible thing. And thankfully, they went on. He was fine. Another business that did survive it sort of headhunted him, which was great. And it was at that point, I think, when I realized, my gosh, how fragile all these things are, because I'd grown up pretty much with this business being in place, all the way through my teens. And it was really at that point I thought, well, I might as well just go and train to be an actor, because you can't predict anything anyway. And you can try and build your house on a solid foundation, but it can still be washed away. So there you go.
And so you went on then to Bristol Old Vic Theatre School.
Mm-hmm.
Do you regard that sort of conservatoire style education as sort of imperative for any would-be performer?
I don't think it's imperative. I don't believe that all actors should be trained or classically trained in that style. Not at all. However, I think it's very unfortunate that we don't have enough in place anymore, and haven't for a considerable amount of time, for those actors who, for whatever reason, either by choice or means, can't, say, engage with a rep system, for example. I think that's a great shame. On a personal level, I feel I work best with a safety net. And drama schools can't teach someone how to act. But what I felt I perhaps needed was to be aware of what I could use technically. And one of the great things about Bristol Old Vic Theatre School was that it was about techniques. They never pushed this idea of, we're going to turn you into actors, or we're going to unlock the secrets of being an actor. It was, we're going to provide you with things that you can use practically. And then after a while, you can sort of approach a role knowing that if you run into trouble, well, I've got this thing over here that I could perhaps use, or I've got that thing over there. Or if you're feeling particularly confident, these are the three things I can absolutely throw away. and do something a bit dynamic with this. So I don't believe in a one size fits all. I think, sadly, however, that for young people to be within the possibility of being noticed by the industry, being noticed by agents, being noticed by casting directors, producers, it's increasingly becoming kind of the only route to being put in front of them, which I think is a little bit unfortunate. But no, I don't think it's... I've worked with actors who've been trained in very, very different ways, and sometimes, and well, most of the time, rather than being problematic, the difference in your training is quite exciting, because you realize you're coming at things from very different places. Then you work with an actor who may not have come through that route at all, and they're working in a different area. So, yeah, viva la difference.
It is interesting you say that, and particularly about being noticed by the industry, the resistance that there can be to any sort of new means by which that can be done. I mean, we attempted last year to mount a sort of, we wanted to offer showcase opportunities to those that maybe didn't have one, or maybe who had had one a long time ago, wanted to, were re-entering the industry or something like that. Had to pull it. Literally not one single agent or casting director or company was prepared to come and see it.
I think that, yeah, that's, I mean, even allowing for the fact that how busy things are, I think probably what happens is that the turnover of things is so far, the event horizons are so rapid, that eventually what happens is, I'm trying to put myself into the position of, say, a casting director. Thing hits the email. Oh, God, I've got to do this. Okay, right. Well, I'll just go to those 5 people I know. Who's available? And I can understand that. And actually, I think it cuts at a deeper issue in the industry altogether. And it is where sometimes supply and demand can get us. There's obviously a surplus, which becomes difficult, and then there's also, because there's so much money runs through it, then it's become who's bankable, who's proven. But one of the things I still remember reading about are these individuals. One's just popped into my mind, and that's Dennis Carey, who used to be the artistic director at the Bristol Old Vic Theatre, and would get on trains out into the regions and see actors who nobody knew. Now, I don't think the current, and this is not a slight on the current artistic director of the Bristol Vic Theatre, I just don't think the gentleman's got the time. Things were different, but the fact that you had people, Olivier is another one, very famously, of course, he would bring people into the National Theatre who were completely unknown. He'd search. So there's obviously been a tremendous shift, and I think one of the shifts has been everything is just at such a rate of knots now.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult and expensive for them to get the assistance that they require. So it is a shame, albeit an understandable one. A lot of your career has, I'll say a lot, but a certain proportion of your career has seen you involving yourself in very long-running or recognisable story brands that generate very strong feelings among fans. I'm sort of thinking particularly of two brands that are so often linked in the mind of the populace in the form of Doctor Who and The Mousetrap. Is it daunting to enter a world like that, or is it no more so than it is doing a revival of an already famous play, basically?
I think whatever the job, when you get the phone call to say you've got it, you're usually so excited and so relieved that you can pay your mortgage or rent or whatever, that you don't think about. I remember with Doctor Who, for Big Finish, not the television series, I better make the distinction. It didn't
it didn't really daunt me until I was actually in the room with the other actors, and that was only because it was a particularly odd sort of situation, really, because what Big Finish do is that they recreate and add to eras of Doctor Who that have gone. Amongst other things, they've got a tremendously wide repertoire of shows and so on. So doctors from the past have their own ranges, whether that's Tom Baker or Sylvester McCoy or whoever. And inevitably what happens, of course, is the further back into something's history, the less chance that everyone has survived it. And in the case of the Doctor Who that I was attached to, there were 2 original cast members from that period, and one had sadly died quite young, in the 90s. And I had got the job because it was felt that there was something about my voice that was similar to his, and it went from there. But I remember thinking on the first day of recording, not so much about the immense passion that Doctor Who fans have, and therefore they might absolutely hate this recasting, but that just seemed too far away in a sense. But suddenly being in the room with people who I thought, oh, hang on, these aren't just the late actors' co-stars, they were probably friends as well, because the thing is with Doctor Who, you never leave it in a sense. They might have finished working together in 1967, but because of conventions in the UK, the US, everywhere, they sort of stay as a family in a sense. So I remember just having a sudden moment of, oh, right, just, okay. But they were incredibly welcoming and professional and so on and so forth. But I think I remember being told never ever look on a message board, never ever look at a review, not because the opinions of fans are worthless. It's just very easy to get pulled into the vortex. And of course, because there is such a passionate and protective fan base, any change or a recast or something is going to be contentious on some level. With the Mousetrap, I now know that there is a Mousetrap sort of fan club, group, appreciation society, but all I remember thinking of is, oh, this is just a bit strange, like this show has always been here throughout my entire life. But I think the thing with the Mousetrap, of course, it's in that wonderful position of being the one stage show on the West End where a jobbing actor such as myself can play a lead, because it's bigger than any actor. Whereas I probably only could get about 8 lines and anything else at tops. So
it is sort of as much tourist attraction now as it is show, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, although I remember, again, you sort of go into every job thinking, trying to set up a way of grappling with it. And I thought, well, you're going to play to American tourists, Japanese tourists, which indeed we did. The thing that shocked me most of all was still how big a segment of that was a British audience. So I thought, oh, well, obviously it's still managing to get a home crowd in, so to speak.
It's become a generational thing as well, hasn't it? Because I remember coming to see. It's no secret to our audience that you and I have known one another for the last 162 years. And since we were both pensioners. When I came to see you, and I brought my very dear friend Dana, who is also going to you, and she was saying it was a completely generational thing in her family. Her father brought her and her brother and sister to see it. She has brought all her children to see it. They are bringing their children to see it. It's sort of almost, well, no, rite of passage is a little strong, but it is that sort of thing, isn't it? It feels like it's a comforting family thing.
I think it's also a wonderful antidote, because it's in such appallingly bad taste, and and we love that. Yeah. And the thing is, I think one of the things that I just adore about it is that there it is, nestled in a part of London which is I mean, there's a lot of musical theatre there, but of course it's very high-end musical theatre, shows with immense production values and very often stars, and then you have the very serious plays, and it almost seems like it's trolling them. It's been there forever, and it is just wonderfully lurid melodrama, yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of fun to be associated. It almost feels like you're the bad boy at the West End. It's like Rebel Without a Clue.
Oh, well, I think you've given them some considerable. I shall be sending a copy of this to them.
Assume me for saying that. But then you get this old paradox.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because it's. I know certainly when. Obviously.
And I say that with complete affection.
Oh yes, exactly. Well, likewise. I mean, I know, being an absolute minnow of a producer myself, that when you're sitting there thinking, what can I put on at the moment? There are times when I would love to put on a load of hoary old toot,
yeah,
which is incredibly dated, not in an offensive way dated, but not in a sort of this contains language that was of its time trigger warning dated, but just something as there's something marvelously sort of blasé about the Mousetrap. It does not give a toss, does it?
And yet we had this wonderful paradox, almost a paradox really, because I think the actors all got together for rehearsal. It's a very fast rehearsal. It's 2 weeks, and we thought, well, this is going to be a jolly. This is obviously we'll do the work seriously, but what a thing to be attached to, this crazy thing that's gone on for years and years and years. And as I said earlier, it really is a chance for jobbing actors without, certainly in my case, without much profile, to be able to play a leading role on the West End. But then we had Hugh Ross directing, the actor Hugh Ross, who came in, and not in a terribly portentous but just said, I'm just going to see if this play can be directed, with some of the archness taken out of it, which might have started to accrue to it over the years. I wonder if it can be played not free of wit or po-faced, but quite seriously, which is a kind of wonderfully lofty ambition in itself. But I also remember we were halfway through, and this just goes to show how slow I am as any kind of thinking animal. I was sat in the wings waiting to go on one night for, I think, my third or fourth scene. And I just thought, it's basically the cherry orchard with a murder. And then it occurred to me, I thought, oh, I wonder if that is what Agatha Christie must have thought, that, suddenly there was this novelist who was going to do something for the stage, and her reference point was, well, I'll make it as much like Chekhov as I can get away with. All the snow and the house and the sort of martinet at the centre of it, and then, well, we'll put a murder in. There's even a joke from the cherry orchard in it, where the young boy, I think it's the young boy anyway, opens the door and instead of doing Lopakhin's moo to Varia or whatever, does an impression of a goat. Now that can only be a reference to the cherry orchard. So all that turned up. So it was sort of constantly surprising as well.
It is interesting with things like that, because it's how far do you play them for truth in this? I mean, I know from having discussed with you the glorious hilarity that there was on another production that you did where it had all been played completely for truth, and then the author came to see it and said, this is absolutely astonishing, amazing.
Absolutely marvellous. He said, it's meant to be a spoof. You're all playing it straight. We didn't get that memo.
The you mentioned in talking about Doctor Who the sort of the family aspect of it and the convention, and so you were for a while, and may yet be again a fixture on the convention circuit in certain districts through your work with Big Finish's Doctor Who strand. I mean, that can be a pretty full-on set of experiences for anybody attending, let alone for those there. I suppose. How was that for you? And do you have a particularly fond memory of the convention circuit?
Yeah, I guess like most of us, it's the we can't sort of hide under a green umbrella because there's no part to play. You're suddenly with an audience, and you got to be this thing called yourself. Except you're not. What you are is on. You're on all the time. And what I found during the first couple was that you learn a way to pace yourself. It's almost like being an actor on a long-running show. Because my mouth used to ache from smiling. Because I had this idea that if I broke my smile, it might be misinterpreted. That I was unhappy to be there, I was unhappy to meet people, I was unhappy to sign things, so I sort of overcompensated for the first few, and my jaw ached. It is a peculiar thing in the sense of there's very few, if any, things we can be involved with as actors where you are then faced with your audience, literally in the room with you. And I remember thinking it was a crazy thing that I was invited to a convention because it wasn't as though I were in the TV version and therefore the face would be recognizable. I was in the audio version, the radio version, and I'm not, I was an actor without a name, just a jobbing actor. I thought no one wants to see me, I'm nobody. But actually, it was very confidence boosting in a way because there were all these people who were interested because not so much for me, but because I was now attached to this thing. And so there were questions asked and people did want a signature and so on and so forth. It took a while to quite to navigate myself through that. And of course, then I was asked to go to the States to do them. So I ended up in Chicago doing a convention thinking there's absolutely no way anyone in America could possibly have a clue who I am. But again, the passion for the show is immense. I think probably one of the best memories of being at them was in a way becoming a bit of a fan myself because suddenly you would see other actors on the bill and they might be actors that, I remember, for example, I was at one and one of the actors there was Julian Glover. And I thought, that. So I sort of snuck into the back of his, Julian had done, I think, over the years, maybe 2 or 3 different leading guest roles in Doctor Who. So having seen him on the stage and in film and so on, and television, over many, I thought, I'll go in and just sneak in at the back and I can watch his piece, his panel. So in a way, I found that I was actually being paid to attend conventions where at times I could be the attendee. Because you're suddenly aware of, and this is the brilliance of things like Doctor Who, both on television or, with Big Finish, because you need a different cast, every story, the people who have been involved with it, it's extraordinary. And, of all profiles, but then, you're suddenly at a convention and you're on the same bill as, Julian Glover or Derek Jacobi or something, and it's a bit odd.
Now you do a lot of work, still in audio, but a different tone, I suppose, with audiobooks. is that a completely different world for you to inhabit, or do you find that obviously there's an overlap in terms of how you perform characters within a book, but you've got so much more to paint as well, don't you?
Yeah. For me, I guess, I think it's in a strange sort of way, the thing I was meant to do. The only drawback of audiobook, the only drawback, is that you don't have interaction with another actor. So you can't look another actor in the eye and create it sounds a bit fanciful, but I really don't think there's anything better than when you're on the stage, or in a scene for television or something, where you and the person you're with are looking at each other, and any thoughts of what you're doing technically, or any thoughts of who you both really are, absolutely seem to vanish. That's wonderful. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why we do it. But what I love about it is that you go from start to finish. Now, I know you do that in the theatre, of course, as well, but you go from start to finish, and you can be your own casting director, because very often, of course, these things have anything from 5 to 25 different characters, depending on the kind of book, novel you're doing. And you have to remember, of course, how to do everyone's voice. And very often what happens is, on chapter 1, someone pops in, they might not pop in again till chapter 18. Well, that's day 4, and you're thinking, what voice did I give this person? So I started to basically cast from the living and the dead, on the basis that a bad impression was an original performance. So there are all sorts of actors that I've been able to, feel as I can channel. But certainly at this stage, because I think it is very, very, it's a difficult career path. And I think that along the way, you've got to sort of have a moment where you are really, really honest with yourself about A, what you want to put into it, B, what your chances are, and C, what actually might be the things you're better at and the things you're not so good at. I don't know whether it's the old thing about, he's got a face for radio, but when I was at drama school, the consensus among the teachers was, this is going to be your golden ticket if you can get it to work. I think it was because I was just a terrible dancer, a terrible mover, and I didn't look good on camera. And when I appeared on the stage, it looked like someone had left a hat stand on the boards by mistake or something. But there did certainly come a point as well. We were saying about the retirement thing earlier. As wonderful as it is to do a stage play, as wonderful as it is when occasionally you get asked to do something for television, even if it is only a few lines, or radio, the stamina has to be pretty immense, and you can get tired. And I think actors don't always admit this, that it can be tiring, and you can get a bit low about it. And certainly, for me, audiobooks have been something of a lifeline, but a lifeline that is actually sort of rather attractive to look at. I think it's got a lot of gold leaf on it, and because I really, really enjoy doing them. The studio that I work with is a half-hour's drive from me. Which again is one of those things, because I think you almost have to be monomaniacal if you're an actor, maybe particularly if you're a struggling jobbing actor. And I think as soon as you realize there might be other things in your life, that becomes very, very difficult. I've got a partner, I've got a home, I've got 1 or 2 other interests. So this has been a way to keep in the business, but at the same time, I don't feel as though I'm having quite the 10 rounds with Tyson that I was having, that I could do 10 rounds with Tyson with my pencil neck. But, the idea of of constantly having that phone call. You're going to be seen for this. You're not going to be seen for this. We can't get you in the room for this. We can get you in the room for that. Can you tear up the country to do this? When that becomes a bit much, this has been a kind of wonderful way to maintain being a kind of actor at the same time as not feeling constantly in the ring or on the motorway with the blindfold on.
You talk about we've talked quite a lot about sort of the character part that's possible to get, the as opposed to the big leads, and we talked about the risks that have been taken about actors with lower profile. And I know that one of your great joys is looking back over vintage, shall we say, rather than classic cinema. And I've never known anybody with a more encyclopedic knowledge of lower profile character actors.
Because I knew what I was. It's because I knew where I was. I didn't try to aspire to be Cary Grant. I aspired to be Trader Faulkner.
Felix Elmer. So I suppose looking at your great love of that and knowing that you've been doing quite a lot of that lately, how generally have you been coping during lockdown?
This could be absolutely sickening to hear, but remarkably well. And I think it's probably been one of those situations. I mean, it's a very strange situation where it becomes a kind of mirror. I'm not reclusive, and I do like being around people, and I have spurts of being gregarious, shall we say. But early experiences, I'm an only child, and I really, really, I'm very good in my own company. And I guess I'm a little lazy. I do like to potter about the house and so on. So it's not too bad. I mean, I'm not the most physical of people. I do the exercise that just keeps the ticker going, and it stops me from being too out of shape. I still, unfortunately, always hear Olivier in my head saying that actors should be in the best possible shape they could, and it's hard to sort of silence that voice. But I don't enjoy anything terribly sporty, but I do enjoy reading books and watching vintage films and listening to records, and all those things are quite private pursuits, so I find it okay.
And does your wife listen to Wagner in the evenings?
She does. I found her listening to it. My wife is a bit of a fan of the opera, but it's never gone towards Wagner until I did hear her playing Das Rheingold from the upstairs at one point. I thought it was the end of days. It was just bouncing off the floorboards. So she's suddenly, after all these years of being more towards the kind of Monteverdi end of things, I think she's discovered Wagner in a big way. So it's gone a bit nuts in the house, I'm afraid.
We'll probably clip that bit out because I feel maybe the only two people watching have a clue what the reference is. Once the world has reopened in something approximating a safe fashion, what would you like to see come out of the upheaval that is 2020 in terms of the arts?
I think quite a few things are going to be forced on the business, to be honest. The situation of the theatres is really sobering. There are obviously ideas that are being put forward in how to cope with that. I guess rather selfishly, I probably, in my silent moments, selfishly think maybe everyone will go back to the wireless. Because being an actor who's probably done more sound than anything else. I might be in with a chance for some work. But I mean, I don't wish to be sort of all kind of cloying for the past or terribly nostalgic. But it's a shame when some media slip into being almost viewed as something of the past. The audio media, if anything, is really accelerating at the moment, and there's a lot more interest in it. The things that Audible have been doing, things that Big Finish are doing, and others. It would be lovely to think that maybe actors who can't access the theatre, if there is going to be a lingering problem with how any of us access the theatre, then maybe there's opportunities in an expanding audio market. Of course, the downside of that is you've got a lot of people in stage management, you've got a lot of people who are theatre directors, theatre producers. So I wouldn't want one to spike, if you like, to the detriment of another. That wouldn't be so fun. But if that media could be sort of valued again as almost a band-aid for a bit, that would be a possibility. I don't know. But yeah, it's when you hear things like the press releases, or you read the press releases and things like the National Theatre, and you think, oh gosh, this does look rather bleak. And there's always been a fight for investment in the arts anyway, government investment. So it's, but I think I think already there would be incredibly inventive ways and means. Could do something surprising. Glass half full, I guess.
You're married to who is...
Well, I hope so. It could be somebody else's wife.
And she's completely unconnected professionally to the arts. Do you feel makes it a more stable and reassuring household?
It's the only experience I can go by, but all I know is, again, on a personal level, it's really, really wonderful to have someone who's not in the business to be partnered with, for two reasons. I think, firstly, people meet each other in the work they have. They haven't met at a university, or they're high school sweethearts or something, or that they have more than one dating apps. Most people meet in work, or a great number of people meet in their work. And so I know a lot of acting couples. And of course, it's a freelance job, vocation. And I think there's a number of difficulties with it. Firstly, money. And secondly, I think perhaps the inevitable, if one breaks and one doesn't. I think that's a challenge for a couple. No matter how much you're pleased for your partner, if they suddenly become like cast as the lead in the most successful drama series of the moment, and you're still doing fringe theatre or something, that's probably a bit of a challenge. But the other thing is that I don't have to talk about it much. As much as I have loved being an actor and love so much about the business, sometimes talking about it can feel a bit like dancing about architecture. It's daft. And if you're in a green room with actors, it's wonderful, and the anecdotes go round and so on. So does the moaning about agents or whatever. But I think the problem is it can become a bit too like an echo chamber if the only people you're surrounded by are other actors. So I get a really, really great chance to completely break out of that, which is welcome.
And do you ever ask your dog for...
My dog is a natural actor. Frequently. I mean, if I'm alone in the house just with the dog between jobs, that dreaded phrase, yes, I will. I will go to her for advice, or practice on her all the Shakespeare monologues or soliloquies by characters that I'll never be cast for. So she's a captive audience. She's seen my Coriolanus and lived to tell the tale.
As I've been saying to each of the guests that we have in this series, one of the casualties of 2020 has been James Lipton, the founder of Inside the Actors Studio. And he wantonly stole a series of questions from a variety of sources, which I think will go all the way back to Proust, which he would finish each interview with before he'd open to the floor. So I'm just going to have a little rattle through.
Okay.
What's your favourite word?
I quite like the sort of anapest words where the stress is on the end. They're quite fun to say. I don't get the chance to say the word Tennessee much in conversation, but I think that's a lovely word. It's all those S's and that stress at the end.
And your least favourite word?
I don't know. It's difficult to separate words from what their meanings are. And there are some words where that seems more pronounced than others. And I often think that it doesn't matter if it was the most beautiful orchid in existence or the name bestowed on a particularly well-behaved child, but I don't think scrotum works anywhere. It just doesn't. No. I shrivel like it when I hear it.
What turns you on?
Anything in specific? Or
answer however you like.
What turns me on? The old actor's answer. Captive audience.
What turns you off?
Oh gosh, I'm going to sound very serious now. I think kind of any form of reaction. As soon as something happens that's new or different, and then the first thing to do is put a whacking great stick in the mud, that turns me off. That turns me off people.
What sound or noise do you love?
Sound of angels. Cherubim.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Car alarms, not only because in and of themselves they're incredibly irritating and they whine and they hit that pitch, but no one's interested. No one rushes outside to try and save the person's car. In fact, knowing how most people behave, that you're twitching the neck going, go on, get away with it, because he bothered me last week with his lawn mowing at midnight. But also the person who owns the car alarm doesn't recognise it. So it's 15 minutes at least before they decide to go and switch the damn thing off. So, yeah.
That speaks the suburban dweller.
Just mad. I live in Tower Hamlets. You know, I'm on the 60th floor.
What's your favourite swear word?
I don't know if you've got a bleeper on hand or what, but of the modern swear words, I'd say twat. I think it's because you've got that strong T sound, and then the W being so close, and then you can stretch out the R, and it's not the obvious one to hit. I think for anything slightly more archaic, I quite like the word. It was considered a swear word as well. Bedlamite. I think that's quite a good one. But if I find that I can't immediately leap to that, a good twat often suffices.
We haven't had that one so far.
Oh, wow.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
That's quite easy, actually. I think I would have liked to have been a film editor, which is, again, I think it's like the journalism or the acting. It's another way of telling stories. I actually do it as a bit of a hobby. On certain wet Sundays in the autumn, I've got a terrible habit with these vintage films and lots of television series of sometimes sitting there going, no, I would have put those two scenes the other way around, or I would have cut there, or oh, we don't need this bit, it's padding. And I've been very, very guilty of just as a, in the down the bottom of the garden in the shed kind of hobby of recutting other people's work. Don't tell them. And I think, if that would have been. I love the way things are constructed through an edit and how things are saved through edits. I've seen the odd documentary about even very, very well-known iconic films that have been pretty much saved in the editing, that they were such a mess of rushes. I guess the famous one, I can't remember the lady's name because she obviously became very famous as an editor for for Jaws, Spielberg's Jaws, which are practically just saved in the edit. He was about to be sued by his studio and never to have a career, and not to take anything away from the things he did on that film, but her edit was considered masterly. So,
and what profession would you absolutely not want to attempt?
I know it's low-hanging fruit, but no one wants to be an estate agent, do they? it's just so far down the list.
Putting aside whatever one's own private beliefs may be, if when the time comes and the lights go out, if you were to discover that there was indeed a heaven, what would you want to hear said to you on arrival?
It's not so much I think what I want to hear said. What I'm absolutely sure will be said is by the big man himself. You didn't expect this, did you, kid? Words that are going to come out of his mouth, and I would just quiver and turn to jelly, and then posthumously try and do Pascal's wager. Well, I probably wouldn't need to. I was already there. But yeah, I think that's probably what would be said without a wink. If he was feeling particularly benevolent. And we have to put in mind, that he's not always particularly benevolent. I mean, he did send that flood.
Yeah, oh, well, indeed he did. Indeed. And, along with a set of IKEA instructions for a boat. We have had some questions sent in from outside. There's a group of them relate to Doctor Who, and there's one that doesn't. So I shall proceed with the Doctor Who question. Matthew Moyer asks, what is your favourite Ben Jackson story from TV and or audio?
From the audio, it was a story we did by Simon Guerrier called The Outliers, which was just very, very inventive. He did that incredible thing. He managed to achieve the conceit that this story would fit in and around the stories from the 1960s that it is part of, at the same time being very, very witty with anachronisms. He was putting in a lot of anachronisms that people, of course, they wouldn't be anachronisms, things that did not exist in 1966 or 1967. And just putting a little bit of a twist on them, so not being too direct about it. And I just remember thinking that was really, really funny, and we had a lovely cast on that one as well. So yeah, it was just, I think it fell absolutely slap bang in the middle of the whole experience as well. So just at that point where you're comfortable with what you're doing, but it doesn't just feel like another day at work. So that was nice. I did do my research vis-a-vis the television series and the original actor to play the part, Michael Craze, and my favourite of those was a story called The Macra Terror, which, and because I think I was looking at or experiencing all these stories largely through the lens of his character, because that's who I was going to play, I think it just happened to be the performance that was the most or the script that was the most demanding on him. He had to have a bit of an emotional breakdown during that story, and the original actor did it very beautifully, really, really nice. So yes, The Outliers and The Macra Terror.
That does also, I hope, Philip Poole, if he's watching, feel his questions to whether or not you watched old episodes with Michael Craze to familiarise yourself I hope that's been answered for you.
Yes, well, I watched as many as I could have because the BBC decided in its infinite wisdom to burn quite a lot of them or just lose them around the globe. But everything did exist on sound, which was really handy. There was a complete sound track of every story. And as I was going to be doing it on sound anyway, in a way, it was kind of a flavour of what I'd be doing.
Jay Barry asks, is there any direction that you would have liked to have gone in with Ben?
It's kind of frivolous, but there's an actress that works on a different range for Big Finish called Lisa Greenwood, and she is a companion of Colin Baker's Doctor. And she plays a character called Philippa Jackson. And we were at a convention at one point, and you know what novels and television's like, no two people have the same name ever. Or, a forename even less so. And I thought, oh, hang on, there's only so many companions. There's two companions. It's Ben Jackson, and you're Philippa Jackson. So what are you? You related to me? Are you my granddaughter or something? You know, because she's from the present day, and my character's from the middle 60s. So we had this sort of whole fanciful idea of I was her grandfather, and Annika Wills, who plays Polly, the other companion that I'm with, was her grandmother. And she would be forced to introduce us to her friend, the Doctor, and expecting us to be all, oh, you know, what's all this mad world you're in? And of course, our reaction would be, yeah, we know who he is. And he would be the one who was shocked and like, well, how? Well, you've never told me about this, etc. So we had this sort of a fanciful idea that then it would be a kind of meshing of two versions of the series, but perhaps the producers wisely went, no way. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen that, partly because Lisa Greenwood is so much fun as well. She would have been rather fun to have been in the studio.
Liam Campbell Young asks, why did you leave the role, and would you be happy for someone to be recast in your place?
To answer that in reverse, absolutely not. And anyone who takes on this role is going to get a bunch of fives. No, it's absolutely fine. I think the great thing about these characters now, not just the Doctor, but the companions and so on, is that I think we're now getting to the stage where they have become characters that are played by actors rather than being completely associated with one actor. The thing is, it never means a version of it is erased. I always speak about Michael Craze as being, in a way, the definitive Ben, because he was the first and he established so much of the character. And in a way, I just sort of grabbed the baton. So I've absolutely no objections, not that they would be taken seriously, about another Ben. I think it's, if it means the character keeps going, yeah, absolutely. The reason I left, it was a cluster of reasons more than one major reason. It was all around that time when I was thinking of somewhat sculpting back how much I was doing as an actor anyway, which we sort of talked about earlier. But I think I remember the deciding factor being, I suddenly became aware that I was just about to overtake Mike's record of episodes. And being the first recast of Ben, I thought, how does that sit? Is that something I actually should do? He's done, whatever it was, 42 episodes of television. I'd just done 42 episodes for audio or whatever. I'm plucking a number out of the air. So there was that, coupled with the idea of how reasonably much longer can I go on playing it and giving it anything. You know, Ben Jackson is 21. I might have lived 21 years more than once, or near as damn it. So okay. When is a jumping off point? 10 years? Is it 15 years? And And then I thought, maybe go when it's still fun. That dreaded thing. Go when it's still fun, rather than. I think it doesn't. It's not just acting. I think anything, when you're dragging your bones into something, and you're sort of phoning it in, it's already dead. So.
Sort of obliged to ask the question because there has been a huge amount of speculation about it amongst the sort of groups that I looked at when we were saying letting people know that you're doing this. So I take it then you would lay to rest any indication that there was some sort of broader political reason why you chose to move.
No, there was, unfortunately, I think 2 events that were unconnected happened at once. And I can quite understand we're pattern-seeking animals, and everyone loves a good conspiracy, and everyone loves a more melodramatic narrative or something. But no, it really was kind of boring. I think I've contributed probably as much as I can. I'm an actor of limited stretch, and we've had a good innings. And I think anyway, there had been talk, and I think it's now come to pass, that maybe that range was going to halve its output anyway. It seemed like it. But yes, there was a completely unrelated event, but the 2 things were, I quite understand why these things happen, were pulled together as being of the same background, and they weren't.
Attached to Liam's question about why you left, well, we also did have, it wasn't a question so much, but there was Carl Williams who replied to our call out for questions, just saying, please come back. If the door was left open for you, is there a set of circumstances where you might be persuaded to return?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and it wouldn't be persuasion. It's not. I mean, I don't. Like Sean Connery, never say never, because they're just named the story that. But I think I'd be absolutely foolish to, because it wasn't. It's not of that kind of, well, I've done that, I'm never doing that again, I'm off to greater things. It was more a case of, I think that's probably as far as I can go with it. But if there was something that came along, absolutely, I'm not I'm not precious.
There's actually 2. Sorry, I thought there was only one question. There's one more. Nick from Hendon has asked, is there an actor that you would, preferably one who's still alive, that you would dearly love to play against, but you haven't had the chance to do so?
I have been very fortunate that I have worked with my acting hero, David Warner. Growing up, I had 2. We all have like actors who we love. I think then if we're interested in being an actor, we have the actors who we sort of more than love. They become people in a way we almost start to want to emulate for their immense talent or whatever. And the 2 for me growing up were David Warner and John Hurt, who were actually friends and did a film together, David Halliwell's Little Malcolm. I got to work with David on a Doctor Who, and it was sort of everything that I could have hoped for. He was a gentleman. He was extraordinary performance, and it's on a recording, so I can't lose it. It's not ephemeral. It's not like doing stage. John Hurt, of course, sadly no longer with us. That would have been extraordinary. There's no one that sort of springs to mind, although as soon as we finish I'd probably go, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful to work with her, or wouldn't it be wonderful to work with him? But I feel very, David Warner was a big tick on the list and one I never thought would happen.
The final question we've had in is from Zell in Portishead. You are a Bristol and Environs resident. What, if anything, should replace the Edward Kelson statue?
I said this at the time, and I'm very, very pleased that although my suggestion has been forgotten, it is catching on. And in fact, I think there is even a petition. And I suggested a gentleman by the name of Paul Stevenson. And he worked for Bristol Buses. And he was very involved in the civil rights local to Bristol in the 60s. That just feels incredibly appropriate to me, and it's a Bristol-born person, you know. I think he was second generation. If not, I mean, he is a son of Bristol. I think that would be nice.
With which I'm in full agreement with you. I think having somebody like that to represent something of the struggle which we're all learning about, those of us that haven't been directly impacted in our lives, is a wonderful idea. We associate ourselves with that, and of course we as a company associate ourselves with the movement to counter that, and we'll be doing our own reflection as time goes on.
Yeah.
Chapman, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Paddy. It's been a pleasure.